Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about another new release of the DiskStation 2020 series from Synology. I want to talk about the brand new 4-bay, the DS420j. Now, for those that aren't aware, the J series from Synology has been around for a hell of a long time. For those that aren't aware, the J represents value. I don't know why. I don't think anyone really knows what the J stands for, and if you do know, let me know in the comments. But the 420j from Synology represents their very latest 4-bay solution for people out there that want to have access to some of the great software options from Synology and DiskStation Manager. Now, straight away, I've got to tell you, this is probably one of the most capable 4-bays, in the J series at least, that they've ever put out there. The previous generations, the 416j and the 418j, were good in their own way, but let's be honest, they were a bit underwhelming. And one of the things I always noticed with the Synology product families is, be it intentional by design or by accident, with each family of devices, the Play, the Plus, the J, the Slim, the XS, whatever, they all seem to have their own little bracket with very little overlap. Where there was tiny overlaps, it was very, very minuscule. And they said it was because they were targeting different kinds of users, be they business, high-end, large-scale backup tools, photographers, or home users for multimedia. And I get that. But the J series before, this one at least, always seemed to be an enormous jump from the next tier up, the standards and the pluses. Those devices seem to be Intel powered, this, that and the other, capable 64-bit processors, really taking a chunk out of things. But before that, the J series was, frankly, a bit pants. With the new one arriving with that Realtek CPU, the 420j arrives with the Realtek RTD1296, a 4-core 1.4 gigahertz CPU. It's a 64-bit ARM-based processor as well, and that 1.4 gigahertz per core is definitely a huge jump over the dual-core 32-bit ARM processor in the unit before this. Now, it also arrives with DDR4 memory, which is always good, but it only arrives with 1 gig of memory, which is a little bit less good. 1 GB of memory does kind of prohibit a number of the great things that CPU can do, and Synology have let it and been able to make it do in larger scale boxes like the DS418 and the larger generation ones involving that CPU. There's been a bunch of units like the Play Series 2-bay and bits and bobs like that, and the 218 too. But a 218, not 2182, that would be weird. That's a grammatical error in its own. But the DS420j is still fantastic value, arriving at about 240 to 250 quid without VAT, without the hard drive media, and supporting things like Synology Hybrid RAID. It is definitely still a very valid Synology in 2020. But I've been throwing words at you for the best part of 3 minutes or so. So let's get inside this box and take a bloody good look at it. Now, as mentioned in my other videos, the brown box packaging from Synology may seem fantastically underwhelming. A lot of brands out there are still kind of producing these units in these, frankly, dull brown boxes. But fair play to them. The reason they do that is because the majority of you are buying these devices, on the internet sites. You're buying them, at span.com, at Amazon, at the rest of them, and you're buying them online. So you never even see the packaging until you've already bought the device, and you look at it for all of 4 seconds. So, to be honest, I'm not going to really have a go at them for the external packaging, even though I would like to see a more graphical box, because, PC 90s gamer, I bloody love colourful boxes, but let's not have a go at them too much, the retail packaging. You've still got a lot of information about the inside of the box, and lots of information about what this can do from Synology, and some of the hardware attributes as well. If we open this bad boy up and take a look inside, we can see what we get for our money. Now, we have got, in the little box here, the UK mains lead. And again, if you buy from the guys at span.com, you will get regional power leads from whatever country you're in. They'll send it and include it. And apparently that's a big deal. In the UK, you can kind of buy any plug, even international plugs. But there are countries out there you just can't buy these, apparently. Who knew? On top of that, go a little deeper and have a look in the accessories box. Now, the accessories box, if you take a look inside, we have an external power brick there. And again, more information about the PSU inside this, as well as the capabilities of this device, are in the description with the link to NAS Compares and the full review there. I do recommend you check that out. That's the PSU. On top of that, we have screws for 2.5-inch and 3.5-inch hard drives, as well as additional extra screws for the rear of the chassis that we'll go through later on, with a very unique chassis design on this. I say unique, it's the 3rd or 4th, maybe even 5th generation 4-bay J series, but compared with the majority of Synology NASs, the chassis on this is very, very different. Whether you like it or not, we'll see. We've got a Cat 5e LAN cable here, and again, it's worth highlighting that this is a 1 GBE box, something I will touch on later on, but it's a 1.8 meter cable. On top of that, we have our quick start installation guide that gives us loads of information about this device utilization for the first time, how to set it up easy with Synology's assistant software, and some more information about setting up your DNS and the applications, the client apps, and more. And that's about it, really. For the box, there's nothing more in there. Just chuck that there. Leave that there for the rest of the video. And we'll remove the lid there, and we'll take a good look inside this device. Now, it's worth highlighting, I have already removed the bag on this device. Prior to this, I wanted to double check that it's got here in good order. So there is supposed to be a bag around this, but I have already removed it prior to the video. Really sorry it's not in there. On top of that, empty box. So we'll get that out of there, and we'll take a good look at this NAS itself. Now, I mentioned about just how different this chassis is to the majority of 4-bay NASs. I know this retro design isn't for everyone. I'm not massively keen on it, if I'm honest. I know there is a demographic for this case. I know a lot of you out there actually quite like it, notwithstanding the fact that it is incredibly covered in ventilation. Look how much ventilation that front panel has, as well as the ventilation there built into the side into the Synology logo. And on top of that, it's a metal chassis. And again, this divides opinion substantially, because the rear of this is all metal there, the top, sides, all metal, but the base is plastic coating around a metal internal frame. And I know a number of you are not keen on plastic chassis. Now, NASs are left on 24/7, days, weeks, months, even years in some cases. And with them being on for that length of time, they can make a lot of noise. And metal chassis can generate a little bit more hum than plastic chassis due to the hard drives vibrating inside. This has got Synology's own noise levels are reported at 20.6 dBA. And I think the majority of 4-bays sit at around 19 dBA. So it is a noticeable pinch higher than the majority of 4 and 5-bay and even 2-bay devices from their product series. But again, a lot of that is because of this chassis design. Something I never quite understood, because surely it costs more to make this metal chassis. Older generations of this device involved more plastic, and they were white in design as well. So I do like the color scheme on this device. And, although I'm not hugely in love with the design personally, I love that level of ventilation all around the device on a 4-bay chassis, particularly a 4-bay that's not hot swapping enabled. It's not designed to have trays that go in and out in the traditional sense, where with hot swapping you don't have to power down the device. You just leave it running, and you can pull drives out and introduce new drives. And as long as you don't destabilize your RAID by removing more than one disk, then hot swapping is something that's open to you, not on this. But nevertheless, despite that lack of hot swapping, it is an incredibly well ventilated NAS, and I can't begrudge it that. Now, if we look at the front of it, bring it to the camera, we can see those little lights there built into the side. These are all the LEDs that denote drive access, system access, network activity, and general system health. There's a power button there built into the front, and an additional couple of lights just for status really, and just to let you know the device is running. Very subtly, we've got the model number tucked into the corner there, and ultimately it looks very, very similar to that of the majority of J series NASs. What is it that makes it different? Other than the CPU and the memory, not a vast amount, but that CPU and memory is enough of a difference to kind of justify it as a new purchase. Maybe not an upgrade for the 418J, but definitely enough to put it under your considerations. Now, with that ventilation built into the front all the way through, and that passive cooling of those side ventilated panels working with the front, it's worth talking about the rear of this device. Now, the rear of the device has got those 2 fans built into it there, along with a couple of USB 3 ports there for connecting external drives and other supported USB devices. the fan panels pointing to the rear of that, we will go into a little bit more depth in a moment when I open up this chassis for the first time. But just focusing on those ports there at the bottom, the USB 3 ports, as I've discussed before, and indeed prior to this recording, I've been reviewing the 220j. USB 3 on a NAS to me should be minimum. And the fact that I'm seeing a number of NAS brands out there producing servers like this with USB 2 rather than USB 3 in 2020 is damn depressing, because the cost of these two ports in production cannot be that different. I mean, they're going to be different, but it's going to be so small. Even at mass production, it can't be that much. And the excuse that a number of brands utilize USB 2 ports because some peripherals don't need USB 3 or they're going to be for KVM stuff, it's not doing it for me. And I'm glad that even on this budget series model, this 4-bay RAID 5 enabled NAS, we've got USB 3 as standard. The 1 GBE port, and this is another thing I'm going to kind of let slide, because even though in 2020 we're seeing a huge growth into the likes of 2.5 GBE, 5 GBE and 10 GBE becoming more affordable, I'm glad that this arrives with the 1 GBE port to keep it cost effective, but this better be the last time we see 1 GBE on even value series NASs. Given that Synology has a release schedule of around 2 to 3 years with each generation, I would like to hope this is the last J series, at least in 4-bay, that we see with a 1 GBE port from them. Now, apart from that, the rest of the chassis is very similar to its predecessor, and I will open it up in a moment, but let's talk about what that hardware brings to the table in terms of software, because the software inside this device, like any Synology, is a huge part of its investment. When you are spending, 240, 250 quid, so $250,000 without your hard drives and without tax, you want to know you're not just getting a big metal box. You want to know there's stuff in it, and some of that stuff is the software with DSM 6.2. This device arrives with the support of Disk Station Manager 6.2 currently, with DSM 7 promised in Q3 and Q4 of this year, which in the Taiwanese and Eastern schedule is typically between September and December, so do bear that in mind. With the release of that software in its current form, DSM 6.2, on this, you've got the majority of the applications open to you. Unlike a number of the other cost-effective solutions I've talked about, although this only has 1 GBE of memory, it's still enough to open a few more doors. Not loads of them, but at least a few more. It has support of Synology Hybrid RAID, which is a great alternative to traditional RAIDs like RAID 1 and RAID 5, because it's a more fluid RAID system that lets you mix and match drives. You're definitely not going to take this device on day dot and fill it with 4 completely different drives, but if you wanted to add 2 drives at the beginning, use that for a few years, and add some bigger drives later on in the other bays, or fully populate it with 4 TBs, for example, and swap it out with 10 TBs when they become more cost effective, SHR lets you mix and match drives in a way that RAID just doesn't. Traditional RAID will not let you mix and match drives and take advantage of the benefits in capacity. SHR lets you do that. Now, on top of that, there are a number of key applications included with this device that are also worth talking about. Synology's entire suite of applications is an incredibly evolved and impressive platform. We utilize devices like Android and iOS mobile phones, even Windows PCs, and Mac with iTunes allows you to buy a system that has software built in and add to that incredible vibrant library of applications with first-party apps that are updated all the time. Synology gives you that too, with its own apps inside the device by default and access to downloading hundreds of free ones, both within the NAS and client applications for desktop systems like Mac and Windows and mobile platforms like iOS and Android. Not all of the Synology applications are possible on this. Straight away off the bat, you can forget about things like virtualization. You can forget about large-scale surveillance. With surveillance on this supported up to around 15 cameras because of that 1 GBE memory. So surveillance station, as great as that tool is, you are not going to get the huge, evolving surveillance option that you would in bigger devices like the 918 Plus. The apps also included inside it that run pretty damn well are ones like Synology Chat, Synology Office, Synology Drive, Synology Moments, Synology Mail, Synology Calendar. All of these applications that are designed to replace the likes of Google Calendar, Microsoft Microsoft Outlook, Microsoft Office, WhatsApp, Skype, Microsoft Office, Google Docs. The list is huge, and all of these apps are available with this device with their own first-party software. Now, what's important is, I know when I've said this before, a number of you go, well, those apps sound nice, but you know, I've already got WhatsApp and Skype and Docs and whatever. What the hell do I need those for? And that's a very, very valid point. But all, and I do mean all, of those third-party alternatives these days rely on a huge amount of cloud support. And a lot of your data will live on the cloud. And the whole point of NAS is to have a private server that you can choose to just snip and disconnect from the internet and only have on your network in the home or the office. Now, to have that close-knit system and the ability to exchange messages, exchange photos, create huge collaboration suites with NoteStation as well, which allows you to create a kind of shared sandbox to-do list that links to the mail, that links to the calendar, that links to the chat, that links to the Docs app, all on the network, not using the internet or the cloud, on the network. And with mobile applications supporting all of those apps too on the network or the internet if you choose, means you can create a complete private network that's incredibly evolved and able without jeopardizing your data on a third-party cloud server. Of course, you can migrate data between this and third-party clouds if you choose. It supports Dropbox, Google Drive, Amazon S3, a bunch, you know, but a whole bunch of other third-party platforms, and Synology's own Synology C2 platform. You can even encrypt all the data first before you hand it over. But it's still worth highlighting that at least you have the choice to do that. You're not forced to do it in lieu of using the software. So that is something that's available with all Synology NASs, not just the 420J, but it has to be highlighted that the hardware inside this will limit you in a number of ways going forward, with that memory being the prime disabler. The CPU inside is incredibly evolved, way better than its predecessors. In fact, the CPU inside this was available in NASs that were 50, 60 and even 80 quid more expensive a year ago, and they're including it in their value series, which, fair play to them, tip the hat, that is a good thing they did. Now, the system itself, when it's running, DSM is going to be a little bit more streamlined compared with things, devices like the 918 and the 1019 and the 1819 and stuff like that. And if you're only a home user, you're not really going to notice it. If you're streaming multimedia to your PlayStation or Xbox or Smart TV, you're not really going to notice it. But because of that 1 GBE limitation, it means that things like BTRFS and 4K transcoding aren't going to be possible on this device, because that's got the CPU to do those things. It's not really got the memory to do it. And remember, the running of the device is going to use some of the memory just by default. Even when you're doing nothing, you're still kind of using something. Now, at 240, 50 quid, it's still a great NAS for first-time NAS buyers. And if you're going to use it as a network backup to another even bigger NAS system, be it Synology or another brand, this is a great choice, thanks to that SHR support and all those applications as well, with a myriad of third-party and first-party app support built in. But it's still a cost-effective solution. And one of the ways in which it's cost-effective I'm about to show you. Now, I mentioned I'm not a huge fan of this chassis, and I know I'm probably in the minority, because although it looked, I always think it looks a bit 70s retro, but I know that's just my personal feelings. If we look at the rear of the device and open up that back panel there and remove one screw, these are thumb screws, so no screwdriver required. Remove that there, remove the next one, and finally remove the bottom one. Sorry if there was noise there when that screw hit this big old wood table. If you remove that down, you can take a look inside this device. Now, as you can see, those two fans lock down and they are connected to the inside there. Feels a little flimsy, doesn't it? It's not designed to be open all the time. If we look inside, we can look at the trays. And the trays, although they are full trays and they are plastic just like all the others, it's a bit no frills. There's no click and load here. And although we've got screws for 2.5-inch drives, because this device does support SSD caching, it kind of pales in comparison with some of the bigger units that we've talked about before. If we remove all 4 of these trays, we can take a good look inside and have a look at that CPU and that whole setup really inside. So remember, it sits like this, but in order to show you the inside, I've got to rotate it a little bit. As you can see, it's a little basic, the inside there. I'm having difficulty getting the full light in there. But again, the NAS Compare article will give you a bit more information. And of course, I can lift the top there and remove that, so you can get an even better look. But it's still not going to be great to show you that inside board. And as you can see, the memory is not readily available. It's all covered there with the CPU inside there under that heatsink, but it's still kind of barren device, and it is certainly aimed at a more cost-effective NAS buyer. But once you've got drives installed in there, like the 14 and the 16 TB drives, Seagate Iron Wolf that I've mentioned before, you're going to have a lot of storage potential, and you do have a good CPU and memory to keep you started. But just be aware that there is a slightly lower glass ceiling than a bunch of other devices, and if you intend to push the boundaries of what this device can do, you will find that those boundaries, they're not going to move. Okay, so bear that in mind. But overall, the 420j is still a very solid NAS solution, and definitely a decent follow-up 2.5 years later to the DS420j. So ultimately, should you buy this if you own the 418j? There's arguments for and against, because the 418j still did feature an RTD1293 dual-core CPU, which was the same frequency but a lower capability and half the cores. So, they're very similar. But if you own the 418j, I don't think you need to make the jump to this yet, because I think you're going to be all right for a while. If you had that NAS, maybe jump to something with a little bit more oomph, like a 418 Play or a 918 Plus, or wait to see what a 920 Plus, if ever it arrives, looks like. Apart from that, if you're looking for a nice entry point into the world of NAS, you can do a hell of a lot worse than this, because you do get a huge amount of storage potential, huge amount of app potential, and a very rugged design that will not let you down. But other than that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Do let me know if you agree or disagree with a number of my comments, because let's face it, there's a lot of hard drives, a lot of NAS out there, and I'm only one man. I'm not infallible. Click like if you've enjoyed the video, click subscribe to learn more, and visit the links in the description to SPAN to get hold of your NAS today, or to the NAS Compare hardware review, where we've got loads more information on this device. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. Nearly wrecked the joint, and I'll see you next time.